Hello and welcome to Optimal Game State. So this weekend has been the pre-orders for the new edition of Bloodbowl, and like most people, I think I am pretty excited to get my hands on that new box. So I have it ordered, but after the announcement of the pre-order came out, I actually wanted to go in and get myself a new team. So I picked up the Vampire Bloodbowl team last Saturday. And I said to myself, I'm going to get this team up and running for Halloween. So I'm recording this on Sunday night. And I basically just powered through and I got it onto the pitch. Now, the reason is because I already had this Shambling Undead team. And if I had a Shambling Undead team and I had either the Necromantic Horror or the Vampire team, I had two pretty Halloween-y themed Blood Bowl teams, so that seems like it would be just a nice little thing to have. So if you've been following the channel, you know I tend to like to do winter themed narrative warcry bits for Christmas, and I've done Easter ones where we've been capturing little chocolate eggs. Actually, yeah, you could do that with Blood Bowl, couldn't you? You could maybe, anyway, we'll not worry about that yet. So I just wanted to get a Halloween themed game going. First part of this video, I am just going to talk about how you can just hammer through and focus on getting what you want to get your team on the table as fast as possible. And in the second half, I'll maybe talk a little bit about doing these teamed event games, and I'll just show off the miniatures we had for the Halloween one. So the first thing is getting that undercoat down. And in this case, my recommendation is to essentially slap chop to start, but that's not where we're going to be finishing. But we'll be doing this zenithal highlighting. So we'll spray with black from underneath, use some sort of gray to get a little bit of contrast between the white or the black and the gray. I think in this case, I actually used two grays. It was like a dark gray and a lighter gray. One thing I will say is I have had terrible experiences with white spray. White spray does not work well for me. Often, even if I'm using an airbrush, definitely if I'm using a can. So I tend to try avoid it, and I tend to work in grays. With the whites for this, what I do is I come back with a dry brush and I dry brush that highest level of white in, and that gets us those. It's a grayscale picture of the model basically before we even do any work, and it's gonna help us in the long run. It'll give us a little bit of extra work being done for us as we go on. Second step is going to be using some contrast paints. Not a great picture of this, but for this particular list, it's reds, it's blacks. There are whites, so there's a lot of shirts. And with the shirts, I was actually able to leave them with the dry brushed white as they were. And later on, I could tie it up a little bit if I wanted. But Wildwood was good for the boots. You might experiment around and find what works for you. The Garak Sewers contrast also works quite well as a kind of a base layer for leathers. But these vampires have leathers, they've got red, and they've got black. There is the white for a lot of the shirts. There is, some metallic, so I think there's a gold, which I used. There's a lot of different options, but I'm quite a fan of using the Canoptic alloy. That isn't a contrast, but this is just about getting the base layers down. And I find the contrast paints are very, very good for doing that. Not even as a end piece. You don't have to necessarily leave them as is. We're not going to. So you basically work through, you get all your contrast down. You will have variations in it. You might have places where you're not going to do contrast. So I did talk about doing some metals there. You might find some other elements where there are different approaches or different paints you'll use, but often getting that first lick on with the contrast will be really good. Now, this is where I'm going to get into more of the kind of tips. Having a set of paints that works well for you is invaluable. When I went into this project, I knew I was going to be doing flesh. I knew I was going to be doing red and black. And for red and black, I've spent a lot of time with my Black Templars. I spent a lot of time with my Slaves of Darkness. I'm very, very comfortable because I know that I can go ahead and I can take these. So for so it was Blood Angel contrast, and then over that, Mephiston is about the same color. You can kind of tidy up sections of it if you want, and then you can do a big edge highlight with Wild Ride Red, and then do a smaller one with Fire Dragon Bright. Or alternatively, you can do a tight edge with Wild Rider Red, and then just use the high edges, like the very, what do you call it, the kind of glinting highlights with that orange. Similarly, you don't necessarily need to go into Incubi Darkness. It is handy to have in this particular set, but in this case, I think I did go straight in with a Thunderhawk Blue on the black. Now, this was on the armor. You can take different approaches. I have different triads that I'll occasionally use for, the base to highlight and the edge highlight or higher edge highlight. But yeah, when we went in with the Thunderhawk Blue, and then went in with a smaller highlight with the Fenrisian Grey, that black looked really well. I do have another set that I use. I haven't mentioned it because it's a set from Secret Weapon Paints, and unfortunately that particular company no longer sells them. But for that one, it's a lot grayer, so it doesn't have that kind of blue feel to it. It's more in the greys, and you can kind of get different variations on it. So when we're looking at those reds, they are quite orange. You might get a version that's kind of a pinky one. The point I'm making here is when you look through guides, when you look through videos of people doing this, it is worth your while keeping an eye out for these. And when you use them and they work well for you, remember them. And that is here one of the big tips I have. So I really like this paintpad.app. I often put some of my recipes into it and I refer back to them. And I often find that the fact that I have them here, I have them stored, means I'm more likely to use that same one. But I knew it worked for me before, and then I can go in and I can pull out exactly what the details are. And this is especially relevant if you're getting kind of ratios where you're maybe having gradients between the colors, not necessarily doing a straight out pot. Write it down. Now, this website could belly up tomorrow and everything will be lost, so it's probably worth I know a lot of the kind of professional painters often have a book where they will write it down. It doesn't matter where you do it, just that once you find those sets of colors that work well for a recipe for you, to write it down, so when you do come up against another project and you're trying to get reds or blacks or whatever, you will have something that you've used before and that you're comfortable with and you know good with. In relation to getting colors, this is a website that I found recently enough. So it's by MW Paints. If you look at the site itself, he is a very accomplished painter, but he does have a couple of tools in it. In this one, what you do is you upload a picture into it and then hit Get Palette. So I've put in one of the vampires in there, and then it returns a list of different paints. So depending on which ones you have, so this has Citadel, Vallejo, Orange Painter, Pro Krill, and Scale 75. I use AK Interactive a lot, which is not on the list. And it doesn't have contrast for a Citadel color, but it's doing a pretty good approximation of it. So what it did is it pulled out a bunch of colors out of that particular image and tried to get the closest match it could. Now, it does have some reds in here, and it's not necessarily picking up all the reds that we will be using. Often, if I wanted to properly color match, I would try get just one single block of the color of the image and then ask it to tell me which of the paints it is. But it can be quite used. Now, it's not developing triads. It is just going to give you single paints, trying to match as close as it can to the ones that you've given in the image. But useful, handy to know. And then the last step, of course, is just to paint the rest of the owl. So in this case, and this is a beautiful model. One of my friends gave it to me. It's a limited edition 3D print, but it's going to be my Vargul for this particular vampires team. So with the reds, so we contrasted in the red, we contrasted in the black. The skin was Space Wolf Grey. And I didn't do too much with it. There was a little bit of highlighting on it. And then what else do we have of note? Obviously, we've got the elf at the bottom. That is a completely separate palette. I'm not going to bother talking about. I did put a little bit of Drushi Violet over the webbing. which is why you're seeing that coming up in that kind of nice purple. And yeah, with the gold, I started with that Canoptic alloy, and I did a little bit of Agrax Dunes contrast over it to give a little bit more color. There's a lot of detail that you're basically just patiently working your way through. So you're doing your edge highlighting, you're building up those layers. There's a lot of patience and experience in working out what works best for you, how to get your paint flowing well, how to get tip. So yeah, those are all things you're going to have to think about. But my key points here: use slap chop as far as you can as a starting point. So you're going to zenithal and dry brush the base of it, or the undercoat, then plot in your base colors. They will get a lot of variation within them already, because you are bringing them up from that undercoat layer. So there is going to be gradients within it, which means that part of your work is done already. But then you're going to sit down, you're going to pull out the sets of paints that you're comfortable with, that you're used to, and you are going to just quickly go through those and layer those up, just being as neat as you can, being as tight as you can, and then you get to a point where basically you just have to sit down and maybe do the teeth, do the eyes. What else do we have to do in here? Just, yeah, the last few bits of detail. Anyway, so I was very, very happy. I got the full team put together. I do, as you can see, have a blue teamed base. So I do all of my undead. There is a roller that I use, and I do this particular team using a turquoise and some greys, just dry brushed over a black base. Nice and quick and fast, and it's basically my Cursed City basing style. So we got a Halloween game going. So this is the Shambling Undead versus the Vampires. I did contact one of my buddies who has a far greater Bloodbowl collection, and he was able to lend me his Necromantic Horror pitch, which I think is super, super cool. So it's got all of these pumpkins underneath. It's got gravestones, so it's very, very Christmassy and thematic. One of the fun things about it is each of the boxes do have some special rules. I wouldn't necessarily recommend playing them. So I think this was saying that it's dusk. So it was a little bit harder to throw, and then at one point later in the game, which we will actually see, it will suddenly go dark, and there's even more penalties, and there's more things you can't do. So yeah, I'm not necessarily sure I particularly like that part, but I love the fact that one side of the board is full of deep shadows, because it is dusk, and it's just the last dregs of light, and then all of a sudden it will change to dark, and then the other side of the board is a midnight thing where we have the central part is glowing and is being very, very creepy. I love doing these events. I love doing these what would you call them? Holiday. I love doing these holiday games. They're an excuse to get together. They're an excuse to have some fun. And having this one in my back pocket, I'm super, super happy with. So it was really nice to be able to get these vampires painted. They were our colors I was very comfortable with, which was good. I just copied the box art. I didn't get fancy with anything, but I'm pretty happy. I think they came out pretty well. And I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you, if you're a Bloodbowl fan, I hope you managed to get your pre-order. I am definitely looking forward to getting those Tomb Kings versus Bretonians on the table. I'll probably do the same kind of thing as I've done here. I'll spend a little bit of time to research what schemes I should be painting, I should be doing with them. And then once I've got that under my belt, I should be able to hammer through them pretty fast and just spend some evenings listening to some podcasts or watching, listening to some movies or listening to some shows, and then just get that paint down nice and quick. And fingers crossed we'll do a few more Blood Bowl videos on the channel soon enough. Thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.